we're discussing Libya today. What's happening in Libya? Our webinar event is titled The Implications of the Regional Geopolitical Competition in the Libyan conflict. We have with us Karim Mezran. He is the director of the North Africa Initiative and resident senior fellow at Atlantic Council, Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East. And we also have Talha Kose. He's joining us from Turkey. He's the senior researcher with the SETA Foundation in Istanbul. He's also the chair of the Political Science and International Relations Department at Ibn Khaldun University. We feel privileged to have both of them. There aren't many people, to be honest, who are experts on Libya, who know Libya well, but both Karim and Talha are very knowledgeable about Libya and what's happening. In international media, we've been following news coming out of Libya. There are many different factions fighting each other, and there are many different countries with interests supporting different groups. It has turned into a geopolitical competition at the regional level. So it looks like a battleground for different powers. But of course, Libya has its own dynamics since the beginning of the Arab Spring, since the fall of Gaddafi. Many things happened in that country with European interests, Russian interests, US and Turkish interests all at play. We find ourselves at a rather complicated geopolitical strategic situation. So we'll try to make sense of that today. Apologies for some of the technical glitches earlier on, but we are actually starting with Talha Kose. He's going to talk to us about Turkey, what Turkey is thinking about Libya, what Turkey's interests are, what the priorities are. We are looking forward to listening to him because in recent months, Turkey's involvement has made the big news in international media, and what Turkey might be trying to achieve there is of interest to both experts and followers of the Middle East. So Talha, please go ahead and for your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kadir, for inviting, and it's a pleasure to be with Karim Mezran. So I would like to briefly give the background and Turkey's objectives, and maybe we can discuss other details in the Q&A session. So to give a brief background, so we have been part of a research team focusing on countering violent extremism in Libya. So we had an opportunity to engage with many civilian actors, local actors in the field. However, in the last couple of months, maybe in the last year, the main focus have been predominantly on the military field. So on April 4, 2019, warlord Khalifa Haftar started his well-funded and well-supported campaign to take over Libya's capital, Tripoli, and to topple the international recognized government of national accord of Prime Minister Fiyaz al-Sarraj. So Haftar forces were successful to take over many cities in the western Libya and encircled the Tripoli. So just a couple of months ago, in the beginning of the January, Russian mercenaries were several kilometers inside the Tripoli, taking control of some key buildings and engaging into an urban warfare against the pro-GNA forces. So Chinese Wing-Lung 2 drones that were provided by the UAE and the Haftar's rockets were hitting the critical locations and targeting the civilian infrastructure in GNA-controlled areas in the western Libya. So some cities were forced to turn their allegiance to Haftar and LNA, and the coalition that were supporting Haftar, UAE, Egypt, France, and Saudi Arabia, were quite confident about a swift victory in Libya for the Haftar side. So Russian mercenaries, Sudanese and Chadian mercenaries played key roles in the front lines of the fight against the pro-GNA forces. So this is the, in general, in a military structure. Actually, they came very close to taking control over Tripoli in the beginning of the January, early February. So two key agreements actually between the GNA and Turkey on late 2019 changed the course of the civil war in Libya. So GNA signed a military cooperation agreement and maritime boundary delimitation agreement with Ankara on November. So despite GNA's weak position against the pro-Haftar coalition, Ankara decided to work with internationally recognized government in Tripoli. So Turkey's military support to GNA, especially the effective drone warfare, changed the balance of power on the field. So it didn't happen immediately, but it gradually changed the situation in Libya. So technologically advanced Turkish reconnaissance and drone drones, Bayraktar drones, and military advisors from Turkish side and Syrian fighters on the ground had reversed LNA's gains. So, and GNA started to control certain towns closer to Tunisia. And most important, actually, victory was the taking of the Vatia airbase near Tunisian airport. So Turkish TB2 drones destroyed several Russian Pantsir defense systems. I think the one significant turning point was capture of Al-Watia Air Base, which was used as a base for attacking Tripoli from the LNA side. And it was also close to Tunisian border, and it also put some pressure on Tunisia. It's one of the largest, I think, air bases in the Northern Africa. And GNA also managed to take the control of Yarmouk, El Sawari, and Hamza camps south of the capital, Tripoli. And Yarmouk base was controlled by Russian mercenaries of Wagner Group. So after the taking control of the Yarmouk base, Russian mercenaries moved to Beni Walid. Then they are heading to Jufra Air Base. So we don't exactly know what will happen to them, but GNA let Wagner forces to leave from Beni Walid and Jufra, so they aren't attacked. So they were given 2 days period of exit. And while these things have been happening, the Tobruk-based House of Representatives Speaker Akila Salih also expressed his disdain for Haftar plan to announcing political initiative was his own. So he canceled actually Libya political agreement, which was signed in Suheirat in Morocco, and also he said Haftar side said they will not be bounded with the House of Representatives, which is also a significant turning point in terms of Haftar's popular support. So one key comment from yesterday from the AFRICOM commander, General Stefan Townsend, is interesting because it demonstrates the involvement of Russia in the case of Libya. So Townsend said that Russia is increasingly involving in Libya, like in the case of Syria. So this is a military footprint of Russia, and several fighter jets, fourth generation fighter jets, MiG-29s have been observed coming from Russia to Syria, Syria to Jufra Air Base. So this may be a threat against if the Russia uses these planes and tries to settle in Libya. This may be a threat to NATO, and this may turn into a broader Russian presence within the Africa. So actually the AFRICOM signed that this is a significant event and signaled criticism towards this. Of course, the Russian authorities denied Russian presence. They told that this is a Wagner presence. So Andrei Krasnov, member of Defense Committee in Russia's lower house, and Vladimir Zaborov, first deputy head of the upper house of international affairs, actually denied Russian presence. So I think this is the situation where we are. So far, Americans were not involved very much, and we are at the stage where the fight is coming to an end in the western part of Libya. So if the Tarhuna is taken by the GNA forces, and if the Russian mercenaries leaves, the western parts of the Libya will be controlled. So, but still we don't know what's going to happen in the coming weeks. So the critical thing is, I think Turkey, so three countries play a significant role as turning point in Libya. So UAE's involvement, Turkey's involvement, and Russian involvement, I think, were the three critical turning points. So why Turkey involved in the Libyan case, Libyan situation? I think we have to understand a broader strategy of Eastern Mediterranean in Turkey. So several actors formed Eastern Mediterranean gas forum. So 7 countries actually: Greece, Southern Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Palestine, Italy formed the forum. And on January 2020, France also wanted to join the forum, and US requested to be permanent observer in this forum. So Ankara was already being pushed and encircled in the Eastern Mediterranean, and there were plans and maps actually promoted by Greek side, Greek Cypriots, Egypt, and Israel, that's encircling Turkey in the Antalya coast. So Turkey felt really threatened about those policies, those plans to encircle Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in order to counter this, Turkey formulated its Blue Homeland Doctrine, which aimed to protect Turkey's geopolitical interests in the region. So actually, the maritime agreement and the military cooperation agreement with Libya, GNA, was done along this Blue Homeland Doctrine and Blue Homeland Plan. Actually, some people argue that this is an offensive thing, but indeed, it is a defensive policy and plan to save Turkey's interest and to prevent Turkey's encirclement in the Eastern Mediterranean. Because Turkey's NATO allies have been involved in Turkey's encirclement. So Greece, France have been involved in this policy. So Turkey really felt threatened in the Mediterranean section. Of course, there was another level in the land side. Turkey felt threatened in the Syrian border. So Russian and Iranian presence in the east of the Euphrates, and PKK, the American, supported YPG in the, western, eastern part of the Euphrates. So Turkey felt that from both seaside and from the land, Turkey is being, encircled. So in order to change this game, decided to reach some maritime agreement with Libya. And also, Turkey also needs, want to benefit from the natural gas and oil resources from the, Eastern Mediterranean region. So those Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum excludes Turkey, and EastMed pipeline also excludes Turkey. So in order to also prevent the emergence of, gas and pipeline game that excludes Turkey, Turkey wanted to get involved in this region. And also, counter-revolutionary policies and plans of United Arab Emirates that's also destabilizing Turkey with the help of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and with the contribution of France is also threatening Turkey's geopolitical and interest in the region. So in order to counterbalance this thing, Turkey gets involved, and Turkey presence actually is important in the sense that advisory, in terms of advising military, Turkish presence is important, providing the drones, it's important, and some Syrian have been also involved in the fight. However, I think that we should consider Turkey's presence in Libya as counterbalancing rather than, a project that aims to take, entire Libya by force. And the process which actually led to Turkey's involvement is Turkey's success in breaking the Qatar's siege. I think that was very important because after that, GNA forces decided to invite Turkey to counterbalance. So right now, I think there's an advancement of GNA forces. It seems that in the coming days, coming weeks, GNA is likely to control, the western part of Libya, but the situation is so unclear. So it can go to, various situations. So I talked about, I would like to talk about scenarios, but, this is in general the situation and Turkey's interest. So Turkey sees that it's a part of a geopolitical encirclement, economic encirclement, and feels threatened about the coalition occurring against Turkey. So Turkey does not necessarily see Libya as an isolated event. It is part of a larger package, and alliance with Libya is considered as a broader strategic effort by Turkey. So Kadir, I'm going to stop here and we can talk about the scenarios later.
Thank you, Talha. Thank you for this great overview. Dr. Mezran, I want to turn to you, please, for your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kadir. Thank you very much, Talha. With your presentation, you have said almost everything there is to say, but you have also showed us, illustrated very well, what is the main problem of Libya in and of itself. It is what somebody called the internationalization of a local conflict, or the globalization of a conflict. But by using this word, what they mean is that what at the beginning was a revolt of the people against a dictator, and then the assessment on the ground of local interests fighting with other local interests, and having international support for the fight, for the realization of these local objectives, it has become the opposite as it is today. Starting 2014 with the creation by the Egyptians and the Emirates of the strength of Haftar, and creating him as an army, and then other countries intervening in other areas, has made Libya simply not anymore the major actor in its own reality, but simply a pawn among many other chess players. So as Talha has said about Turkey, Libya has become one aspect of a geopolitical issue, one aspect of a power projection of the single states. That's why you have Egyptians acting in a certain way, Russians acting in a certain way, and we can always discuss about this thing in a second moment. The Emirates pursue their policy, whether it's for ideology, whether it's for interest, whether it's for friendship or whatever. The reasons for each state are many. The idea of projecting power can be motivated by factors and reasons of the same level. And going there and thinking about why you do this, why that certain state does this, for the reason, for the other reason, it's irrelevant. What becomes relevant is that the situation that gets created is a situation with no solution. That's why two things were very important to do when we talk about Libya. First of all, has been a big lack by the United Nations and the international community in trying to bring a good negotiation in Libya, is that of understanding in the Libyan section, but within the context of this geopolitical clash of countries, reassessments of powers due to perceived American retreat or Chinese expansion or Russian intervention, whatever that reason, we have to understand what every power, regional power or global power has within the Libyan territory. That, in other words, is they shall have created a chamber of compensation where an actor would say, what is the real minimal interest of Egypt, of Algeria, of Italy, of France in the Libyan theater? How can that be reconciled with the legitimate expectation of the groups on the ground that they support, and therefore create a real negotiation on concrete aspects and move on? This has not been done. as a nation that carried the negotiation with sometimes irrelevant actors, or did not address important issues with the relevant actors. So therefore, it's like a gangrene. It get its roots within the territory, and now it's extremely difficult to move it away. At this point, once we do make the effort of understanding all these geopolitical issues that are only represented in minimal part in Libya, one has also to go concretely on the ground and see what are the opportunities now to bring peace or a serious negotiations in Libya, the possibility to work between groups. I think that the situation has gotten very complicated. Complicated because this year of attack against Tripoli has raised a lot of emotions. A lot of people have been killed, people have been displaced, random bombing of civilians, human rights violations. These are all things that carry a heavy weight in Western Libya, at least, but also in the East, as we have seen recently. As soon as Haftar has been perceived as losing, behind his shoulder in Cyrenaica, you had some movement of tribes, groups, some protests, some malcontent is beginning to emerge. Same thing as in the Western area. Now, I don't know what the Turkish intervention has been resolved and has saved probably Serraj and his government, and we probably succeed in pushing Haftar forces at least up to the Sirte Jufra line, and I don't know about the south how much Haftar will be able to take control of. The primary question, in my opinion, in Libya now is possible to create a negotiation between various interests with a person like Haftar present? I think that's not possible. I think that the first step in order to stop talking about political solution or military solution is that Haftar has to be retire or be taken out of the equation, in the sense that I don't think that any commander, any political figure of Western Libya can in this moment sit and negotiate with Haftar. This to me, it's almost an impossibility. If that happens, that we go beyond the Haftar moment, and the eastern part of Libya can produce political figures that can negotiate with the West, I believe that the United Nations should really intervene rapidly and create a negotiation to keep the country united. If this doesn't happen, I think that the partition becomes really almost a fact. If the Russians are really interested in saving Haftar and not only in saving the eastern parts from a counteroffensive of the Misurati and the Tripolitanians, they will have to understand that they have to play on other horses if you want to really get to a negotiated solution that keeps the country united under Russian Turkish influence, that then will be integrated by the other members of the international community, and a system can be created so that the country can be kept united, oil can be freed and sold, and we can move towards a better solution. If this doesn't happen, I really have a hard time thinking that the Russians and the Emirates will scale up and engage against Turkey and the GNA troops an all-out war. I am more of the opinion of those that say that in this moment, what the states are trying to do is create a stalemate in such a way that negotiations can be done, seriously negotiations can be done, either outside between the foreign powers and inside between the legitimate Libyan actors, to try to have a ceasefire that is more permanent and try to find the structure for this country to go and resolve the interest that these external powers have in the country. Problems. As what are the Europeans and the Americans doing? I think that the Europeans made themselves particularly irrelevant in this context. The rivalry between Greece and Turkey and France and Turkey has pitted NATO countries one against the other. Italy has withdrawn from its leading role. They never had it, but thought it had, and now it's completely out of it. The United States are disinterested so far in what is going on in Libya. They are becoming interested because of this geopolitical dynamics of the Russian interventions, the Emirate-Turkish potential clash. These are big issues that the Americans do care about it. They don't care necessarily about what's happening in Libya, as long as what's happening in Libya does not condition the behavior of her own allies. They do not want to see one against the other. So probably the United States will try diplomatically to gather more strength and more effectivity and try to mediate between these various realities before something too bad, too difficult happens. At this point, I like to stop here and be ready for questions.
Thank you, Karim. Actually, one of the early questions was about your comment when at the beginning, when we were just discussing the panel, you had mentioned Turkey's, being at odds with its NATO allies, but you came to that subject just now at the end. You answered that question, so they wanted you to repeat that last statement. If you want to elaborate on that a bit more, I can let you do that, and then I'll turn to Talha.
Yes, just a minute. It seems to me evident that this is the big contradiction. Turkey intervened in Libya to defend the legitimate internationally recognized government. You had countries within Europe, like France, like Italy to a certain extent, Greece, and others who did not like this intervention and effectively condemned the Turkish expansionism and also the Turkish signature of the Maritime Treaty and all of that. This, to me, is a big problem for the Americans because they find allies within the same organization, which is essential for the Western world, one pitted against the other. And this is a big problem. If there is a Turco-Russian or Turco-French clash, what is NATO going to do? What are the Europeans going to do? What are the Americans going to do? Are they going to support the Turks and defend the legitimate government? Are they going to support the French or the Emirates, who are their allies at the same time, against the Turks? It's potentially, all I want to say is that within a clear organization like NATO, it is a grenade, it is a bomb in the middle of it.
Thank you, Karim. You don't find it as a healthy dynamic within NATO, basically, that Turkey is doing one thing and Italy and Greece. But just to maybe extend a little bit, Turkey, Greece, disagreements over the Aegean and the waters, Mediterranean waters, have been around for a long time, and despite the fact that they're both NATO members, and they have had dogfights along the Aegean Sea for a long time. So that kind of tension somehow was managed for years. But now, in the context of Libya, do you find that particularly more dangerous, or how do you see that?
It is particularly more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There are French ships. Operation Irina, which has an alternative Greek command. What about if they see a Turkish ship, they think that it's bringing weapons to Tripoli, and they try to stop it, and a clash occurs, and a warship from Turkey comes to support? I mean, these are all things that can happen anytime,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you have issues on the ground. So it is much different than two states managing their enmity from a mess that happens on the
Thank you.
ground, where the situation can escape control in an instant.
Thank you, Karim. Talha, I want to turn to you. There was my question was going to be about Russia, and there's already a question about that. So I was going to ask you how Turkey manages the relationship with Russia in the context of both, Syria and Libya. And Randa Slim is asking from the Middle East Institute, going forward and depending on how developments unfold in Libya, do you foresee the Russian-Turkish divergent interests in Libya negatively impacting their cooperative arrangements in northern Syria? How would you respond to sort of Turkey managing its ongoing sort of relatively, good relationship with Russia at the economic level and political level, but then on the ground in both Syria and Libya, they're at odds. But in Syria, there has been a recent cooperative agreement. So how do you see that dynamic playing out?
So from the beginning, I think that this Idlib deal was fragile. So I think there's already elements of fragility in the Idlib deal. And, Libya's situation makes it even more fragile. So one way or another, Russia is involved. So we know that the withdrawal of the Wagner troops are allowed in coordination. So that seems that there's coordinated withdrawal from Beni Walid and from Beni Walid to Jufra. So if this withdrawal is not a tactical withdrawal in order to reorganize, and if no attack has been coordinated by Russian side, I think this may be managed. But if Russia wants to stay in the game and further escalate, I think this will make everything much more difficult in Syrian side as well. So there's a potential there, but I think we are also forgetting another actor. So it is United Arab Emirates who invited Russia to this game. So the Wagner Group or another, whatever we call it, it is the UAE that brought Russia and also supported by Egypt. So for the time being, positive relations, coordinated relations between Turkey and Russia allows withdrawal of Wagner. But what's the end goal of this Wagner? So are they gonna be staying in the eastern part of the country? Are they gonna be, trying to have their own base? Or, are they gonna just withdraw? So this will be, but in any case, this gives Russian side another bargaining chip in Syria and in Libya. So it actually makes its negotiation position even stronger. So what makes this possible is there is no NATO response, there is no American response, and there is no EU response. Actually, this is threatening the security of Mediterranean region. So if Russia has a base there, if they station some of their, air defense systems, that's a threat not to Turkey, but the entire Mediterranean, and it's also threatens the NATO. So unfortunately, NATO's unwillingness to engage or counter Russia, or we have heard from the AFRICOM. So this is the first military response. I think this will be taken very seriously by Russians, but to what extent they will use this is very important. So the risks is higher because of the Russian involvement, but if we take Sergei Lavrov's explanation, so we have to go through diplomatic. If it is sincere diplomatic effort, it may move in the positive direction. But in any case, Russian presence in Libya makes it much more risky in Turkish-American relations and also broader regional security.
So there's quite a few questions. So I want to run through them for sure. Instead of spending more time with my questions, there are very overlapping questions anyway. One question to both of you is, how close is Turkey to reaching its goals in Libya, and what is the status quo that the leading regional powers involved in the country would accept? Let's go to Karim, please.
What was the first question?
How close do you think is Turkey to reaching its goals in Libya?
They made a major step forward by defeating the RNA around Tripoli, pushing it back. They probably have reached what they want to do, that is being the power that saved the GNA, that will exercise hegemonic influence over the west of Tripolitania. I don't think the Turks are interested in the whole of Libya. They know that it will not be possible to engage in the conquest of the old. So I think that they are happy to be the savior of the GNA, which is the international recognized government, saving the city of Tripoli, pushing back Haftar mercenaries and these people, and reestablishes some influence over them. I think that is their point. Now, of course, they have to settle that. That's why we are talking about negotiation with the Russians, with the Emirates, because they have to find a permanent solution. They cannot just stay permanently armed against each other at 15 miles from each other, waiting for a counter invasion or something like that. The real issue in the next few months, if this is the trend, will be on what terms do you have a negotiation? On what terms do you, with what powers exercise enough influence over the East versus those who have influence the West can find a negotiated term. The
second question was about sort of what kind of status quo would these regional powers accept going forward? Like what kind of scenario? You mentioned that you didn't think that it could have, Haftar needed to be out somehow, but do you think the regional powers would be happy with the current kind of situation, or do they need to find a solution?
I think that they are not happy with how Haftar handled the situation. I think that I'm sure there must be some really second thinking in Abu Dhabi and in Cairo about this guy that has been there for 4 years, destroyed half of the country, created a military regime in the eastern part that now is crumbling. So probably what they have to do is that's why there was some talking about Aguila Saleh or other people. They have to make sure that a quorum of stateness, a quorum of unity in the East is maintained, and then negotiate. You have to have a hurting stalemate between two parts. You have to have a situation in which the West cannot stay like this and the East cannot stay like this. They have to find a way to talk. Haftar is a figure that is too polarizing. It will not be possible to have this situation created. And this statement is, I think it's convenient for all. It's convenient for the Emirates at a certain point. It's convenient for the Russians. It's convenient for the Turks. A situation in which you stop the war and you start, if it's possible to keep Libya united with figures that will work with it, fine. If it's not possible, then it will be partition, and it will be what it is.
Talha, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Turkey's position wasn't too ambitious in Libya. So Turkey just wanted to prevent toppling of the GNA and also initiate a negotiation process. So yes, successfully, I think Tripoli is saved. However, bringing a broader peace process is very difficult. Turkey cannot achieve itself. I think United Nations, NATO, other actors should be involved constructively, and we don't see those signs. Unfortunately, Turkey is not on page with other constructive actors. On the other hand, UAE, Egypt may be, destabilizing, playing the spoiler role. So there are some potential spoiler actors, but there are not too many actors that may be willing to contribute positive diplomatic engagement. So for the time being, the best option for Turkey is to consolidate GNA's position in the western part of the country, and also not to be, not to completely sideline the eastern Libya. So there are, actors that may be moderate in Benghazi and Tobruk. So I think not losing those actors is also very important. So that's why Turkey will not engage in another military escalation in other parts of the Libya. The Turkish side will encourage GNA to engage with the actors, political actors there, but there are enough international spoilers that may prevent those actors to engage constructively. So that's the limitation. Yeah.
So Talha, there's quite a few questions about Turkey, but I want you to answer rather short if you can. But one of the questions from Alan Makowski is the Turkish fear of encirclement seen in military terms as well as economic terms? Does Ankara see Israeli-Greek Cypriot cooperation or the wider Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum grouping as an evolving military alliance?
Yes, I think this is not just seen an economic alliance. Actually, it is seen as it has some economic carrots, but I think the overall goal, objective is seen as political and may even turn into a military alliance or some joint exercises. So Turkey, yes, the economic side is definitely important. The Eastern Mediterranean gas balance is very important, but more importantly, Turkey sees this as a more of a political move that may also turn into some form of military cooperation in that stance. So Turkey is actually isolated in that ground, and this is seen as a politically and militarily long-term threat to Turkey's interests.
Thank you, Talha. There's still more questions on Turkey, but I want to switch gears and talk about other actors. Karim, if you can address this question about motives of Haftar's supporters, such as France and the UAE. What is their game plan, do you think? Why do they support Haftar?
As I said before, it is not possible to pinpoint any interest in particular. Each state, each national interest exemplifies its national interest with a whole bunch of motives. The Emirates have the authoritarian issue. They do not want to see democracies succeed in the Middle East, in the neighborhood. So they do try to antagonize the realization of democratic. They have the Islamist obsession, which is the other strange theory, where they will never allow a Muslim Brotherhood or a political Islam govern the state. So they will employ all they can to prevent that. They did in Egypt, they do in Libya, they are trying to do it in Tunisia. God knows what if they tried in Morocco, in Nigeria, or in other places. But that is one of them. Then there is all the other potential issues, economics, and you mentioned controlling an oil-producing country. There is the international financial issue. There is the whole plethora of interest that makes it such a way that the Emirates are supporting Egypt to support the takeover of Libya, put Libya in the hands of a General al-Sisi kind of, they thought that Haftar could be something like what al-Sisi is in Egypt, it could be in Libya, that keeps control, keeps the situation down, allows them to do their business, allows them to do their... France, same thing. I had to deal a lot with the interests of France in overthrowing Gaddafi in 2011. And even looking at that, you had personal reasons of Sarkozy, Total, geopolitical issues. It's a whole plethora of things. So France has its own interest in the southern part of Libya. They thought they could get control of the whole of the country. They would have loved to have control of the country for business, plus the fact they are closely interested in in the Emirati buying their weapons. So there is a whole influence there between the relationship between France and the Emirates that might convince them to militate in favor of Haftar for a takeover of the whole country. And so on. For every country, you can easily pinpoint 5, 6 different interests.
I want to continue with Karim. Can you answer this question? Do you expect any shifts in the U.S. position or a different role to play in Libya um, under Trump or in a different administration?
It will be too late for the different administration. It has to come before some form of change. I don't know whether this administration is equipped to deal with this change. I think they like to kick the can and wait and see. But if they have to do something, they have to do something with the United Nations and so really exercise all their diplomatic power and effort to seriously have a stop, a ceasefire on the ground, and then bring all these various actors to a negotiating table and guide it. Will the Americans do that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they have the capacity. I'm not sure that they have the willingness. I'm not sure that they have the political vision or they don't have the interest. Anytime we ask the Americans, they just say Libya is number 125 of our priorities. So I'm not sure that we're going to see the much needed change in American administration. There is always the temptation, although I think that now is past, of Bonapartism, of just going for the strong man that will take care of the situation that is present in large part of the administration. But it's not possible. So I'm not sure that we will see major change. And by the time they would, if there is a change of administration, is a year and a half from now.
Thank you, Karim. Talha, there's another question on Turkey. What role will Turkey's intervention play, if any, in addressing the fractious nature of the GNA's coalition of militias? Will the Libyan actors in the GNA be able to balance their increasing ties with the Turkish government without ceding their sovereignty?
I think it will be very difficult. So one of the difficulties in the GNA side is the fragmented nature of their militias. I think it's very important to empower some of the local actors, for instance, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Fethi Bashaga. So Libyans should do themselves. I mean, that was the most difficult part in Syria as well. The reason why Syrian opposition really devastated during the civil war was the fragmentation. And there is a potential for similar thing in Libya as well. So there are strong militias, but they don't really make coordinated actors. So they can be easily fragmented. I mean, what really changed the situation in Libya, we have to recognize also the presence of Syrian actors and also Turkey's coordination. So Libyans should achieve themselves. If they continue to act in a fragmented way, I think that may be a difficult situation. And Libya's geopolitical and cultural background is also, supporting this kind of fragility. So, one key issue is to making, state making and bringing all these fragmented actors together. So there should be some incentives to be part of the GNA, and there should be also some threats. So this will continue to be a major problem for GNA. So they can be easily manipulated. Some actors can also switch their sides. So this will continue to be one of the most significant weaknesses of the GNA if it is not handled now. So a victory can unite them. So this kind of victory, if this continues like this in the next couple of weeks, this may give new sentiment, but in the long term, I think there needs to be a new grassroots level reorganization of Libya. I mean, in our report for countering violent extremism, we also mentioned that nation building efforts also needs to be done in the Libyan case. Otherwise, they will continue to be fragmented like this. So I think this will be the most difficult situation for Libya, and there is no magic formula in this regard. I think there should be both carrots and sticks to bring them together.
Karim, how do you see the possibility that Talha just raised about different militia groups, different fragmented groups, kind of coming to the side of the winner if there are more military victories? In that sense, do you see this being resolved? I mean, it's pretty clear, I think, from what you said, that you think there has to be a diplomatic process. But if there's there are more, there's a series of military victories, how would that work?
No, that's why there is a red line. That's what I think the sending of the Russian airplanes into Jufra and other and withdrawing the Wagner people into Jufra itself is like saying, we give up that, but you don't even dream about passing over here. So everybody knows if there's going to be the victory, it will be stopped at Sirte and along that area. So I really don't see a continuation of the war beyond that point. The Turks don't want it. No. What I was saying though is that what we've noticed, especially in the last 2-3 months, it was before the attack of Haftar. Fatih Bashaga had done a lot of work into recreating the police, trying to amalgamate the various militias. The attack brought back the militia in the south, but then with the Turks coming in and trying to reorganize, there has been a lot of changes on the ground in Tunisia. They have been reorganized, the communication has been created. I'm positive that we will not see the moment they return to the various militias. There has been a lot of changes on the ground between them. Commanders, somebody ran away, somebody fought with others in there. So it's one of the things I'm optimistic. I think that Libyans, especially in Tripolitania, they've learned the situation. They've learned that they need to overcome this fragmentation. And I believe that if there is the fruit of a negotiation is a national government unity that can act, it will not have the difficulties with the militia. It will have difficulty with the criminal organization. We should never forget that while we are talking about these things, there are criminal organizations that are prosperous, and those will be hard to deal with. Much harder to deal with the criminal organization than with the various fragmentation of militias.
Karim, in this line, actually, there is a question about what might be the best format and space suitable for future negotiations endgame to the Libyan conflict. Which party do you think is best positioned to convene it, to put it together?
The options are a strong agreement between Turks and Russians that forces each side to come to terms. And this is, I don't think it's possible, but it's an option. What I really believe is that with more involvement of the Europeans, maybe the Americans, the United Nations will take again the lead. And they should take the lead with a strengthened mandate with the agreement, because they know they've lost, of the Emirates, of the Egyptians, of the Russians, and to try to find a solution. I think that is the only real possibility. Same as before, but with different dynamics. I will say one thing: when after the attack of Haftar, foreign diplomats and the politicians were saying there is only a diplomatic, there is only political solution, there is no military solution. I always said no. There has to be a military solution to allow for a political solution, and we are seeing this. One of the two sides has lost, has to understand it will never prevail. At that point, you can have a political solution. At that point, you have created the hurting stalemate on the ground that would allow for negotiation to be held. Until that moment is reached, you will not have negotiation. And in fact, it's been like that. We are talking now, seeing now the possibility of negotiation because something on the ground has changed. There has been the military victory of the GNA, temporaneous, I'm not sure it's time, that forces the situation to change and allow for a political outcome.
Thank you. There's one more question. You mentioned earlier the UAE, wanting to confront or oppose any kind of Muslim Brotherhood rule, and I was tempted to ask you if GNA is somewhat aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, but I kept it because I wanted to give more time to questions. But there's a similar or a question along those lines. How important is reported Salafi support to Haftar's coalition, politically and militarily? Can you kind of talk about this, the role of Muslim Brotherhood as well as these Salafi groups for each side?
The Muslim Brotherhood in Libya has never been very strong. It's very limited power. And all those who talk about the Muslim Brotherhood will take power in Tripoli, all the rumors, those are conspiracy theories. People who have the obsession of the Islamist boogeyman, they see Muslim Brotherhood all over, and it's not the case. It's not the case. There are Islamic groups, there are Islamists, but it's not as powerful as it was in Egypt. There's no way. There's no way. And the Salafi who are in the western part are as radical as the Salafi who are fighting for Haftar in the eastern part. There isn't this Islamist conspiracy, the narrative of Haftar that Tripoli is run by Islamists. It's all an exaggeration to say the least.
Talha, I know you wrote a report on countering extremism in Libya, but you have only 30 seconds to address this question.
Good luck.
Well, I think, Muslim Brotherhood's influence was coming from Egypt and Tunisia. So, and there is never strong, Muslim Brotherhood presence in Libya. However, there's an increasing influence of, Medhali Salafis in the eastern part of the country. So they're, getting stronger in the grassroots. And there are also Salafis in the western parts of the country. So I think, and also in Sirte, there are some elements. So it will be very difficult, but I think there is enough moderate actors that can be mobilized to run the country if we can limit the influence of external powers like Saudi Arabia, UAE supporting them. So if we constrain them, their external support, I think there is enough moderate actors in Libya that can run the country, comfortably.
Thank you, Talha. Last question to Karim. Whatever happened to Libya's sovereign wealth or heritage development fund, could it not be used now to stabilize the situation for the local people?
You're talking about the Libyan Investment Authority,
Yes, I believe so.
That's another issue. They don't have liquidity. All their assets are invested. So the idea of utilizing the LIA for, I'm not sure that is a possibility that can be done. It has to be defended and to be kept.
Okay, so thank you for that. Outside the Q&A box here, there were some more questions on their comment section. Let me just read them to you, but I'll give you each a minute or two to conclude. Not necessarily respond to every question, but one of the questions is, following Russian steps in Syria with blatant airstrikes against civilians, do you think Russia will do the same in Libya, or is it more likely just a posturing issue to force a stalemate and political negotiations? I think we've answered largely this question. Can't one make the argument that the US, by not picking sides, is best positioned to lead negotiations as it has allies on both sides? And can we see a Turkish US-supported negotiated agreement with Russia, or an escalation of violence and more war? If so, what's Turkey's guidelines for its policy? So I think we've largely answered these questions, discussed them, but I want to give you each 1 minute to conclude. I'll start with Talha and then go to Karim.
I think for Turkey, we have critical interests with both Russia and US in Syria, and we don't want another, zone of conflict. So the better option for Turkey is to coordinate negotiation process, political process with Russia and US. So I think that would be better option rather than increasing, escalating the situation because of the Libya. So I think that would really balance the situation. So that's the preferred option. I think I don't know how US wants to engage in the Libya. So we don't really see the direction, but it seems that they are concerned about increased Russian presence. So which may help, to counterbalance the negotiation process. I think I see it's a positive thing. So the US involvement, not militarily, but politically, may contribute positively to negotiation process. So.
Thank you, Talha. Karim, last
I
word.
agree. I agree with Talha word by word. That's the preferred solution. A negotiated solution with the Turks solidly in agreement with the Americans and the Europeans, possibly bringing them in, dealing with the Russians, the Emirates, in trying to find a solution that they have provoked with their military intervention, was positively, and try to find an agreement that can move forward and possibly resolve not only Libya, but explain and clarify the international chessboard.
Thank you very much, Karim Mezran of Atlantic Council and Talha Kose of SETA and Ibn Khaldun University. I think this has been a fascinating discussion. As I said at the beginning, Libya is not a very familiar place for a lot of people, but geopolitical competition in the region is actually happening at the moment in Libya. So it was very helpful and important to understand these dynamics. I want to thank you both very much for joining the session and talking to our audience. And hopefully we'll continue this discussion in future events. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our attendees on the Zoom call as well. Thank you.
Thank you.